So I'm going to talk about conditional access. I'm going to talk about a bunch of different things. I got a whole bunch of demos and not enough time. So we'll see what we can go through. Some stuff I might skip, and if there's something you're really interested in and want to see later, we can see it. I've got demo environments that are Intune integrated with SCCM. I've got all kinds of stuff up in the cloud and everything. So, but we'll see that. First thing I want to do, though, is jump around a whole lot. And probably present this would be better, even though I'm only going to present a slide here. So conditional access. And I want to start off with a little bit of randomization here. My slide will come up. I guess that's the next slide. Somehow we got one in there. All right, so when the parade of M's, MDM, MAM, MCM, all wrapped up in EMM. So what this is mobile device management, MAM, Hugh still has this. Oh my God. Hope he doesn't say something nasty. Mobile application management is MAM, which is a relatively new moniker for this stuff. MCM, mobile content management, which Microsoft really doesn't play in except to look at RMS for that kind of content management. And of course, SharePoint and work folders, as we talk about. And EMM is really kind of the overarching thing that says, oh, all that good mobile device management stuff, well, we're going to do it on PCs too. So now we manage the entire enterprise mobility suite. So that's just to give you kind of the flavor. I'll use those things throughout here. First thing I want to show you, though, is device enrollment in Intune. And that's why I say this is a little randomized, because we're going to do this and then let it bake, and we'll come back and look at it. So it takes a couple minutes to actually do the enrollment. So I'll do that first, and then we'll come back and look at the results after we go see some other things. So let me connect my machine up. Make sure that I don't show that text. That guy never. Okay, so let me see if I get my AirPlay to work. Looks like. All right. I'll bring this up over it. I should close my mail out, but I didn't. All right. It doesn't want to sit in front of PowerPoint for some reason. There we go. So what I want to show you on here is I have set up conditional access in my domain. I guess I need to sync with this. I've set up conditional access in my domain to deny access to users in the cloud if they're not enrolled in Intune for email specifically. I've also taken a second step where I have disabled the native email client access unconditionally. So I cannot connect to my mail through my native email address, but I do have an email address here. This is my this is my personal mail, but it is on-prem. So I don't have conditional access for that, just so that I don't have to deal with it all the time. But what I'm going to do is, if I can remember how to operate iOS here, I'm going to go ahead and add an account, add an email account that is a cloud-based mail. And let's see if I did this correctly. Oh, yes. All right, so I'm going to add my account. Of course, it's going to go out, and it's going to ask me to authenticate. And because this is actually an account that I use for certain things, I'm going to slide this down while I authenticate. The interesting part is you'll get to see an MFA process as well, if I type my password correctly. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, too. Let's sign in. The interesting thing is here, my application. See, I do that all the time when I demo this stuff. I put up my screen and I click on that with the mouse. It doesn't do anything. I actually have to touch the screen on the device. So now it gives me the opportunity to do multi-factor. And I have 4 different methods set up. I can choose whichever one I want. The easiest one to run right here is just to send a notification to my mobile app. My mobile app is on this device, so it's kind of handy. It notifies me that I have a request. I open it, pops up the request, I verify it, and close that out. Now when I go back to my logon, it completes the logon. But it's telling me that my organization requires me to up-level my security before I can get to mail. And so I don't understand anything about this. How do I do it? Well, how about we just click on the button to begin. It knows that it needs the company portal app to do this installation. I happen to have it installed already. If not, this bottom message says, go get the app. I open up my company portal app. It recognizes that this device is not enrolled. Oh, that's because I'm shaking, sorry. It recognizes that the device is not enrolled and doesn't even ask me to click a button to do it. It just takes me right to the enrollment process. I click begin, which if you're an iOS user, you know those things are up in the top right. I don't, because I'm not a real iOS user. It gives me some information about what's going to happen, so I can feel a little better about it, what we can and can't do on the device, which is nice, and then what comes next. So I'll do the enrollment process. It'll come up, it'll ask me a couple questions. Do I trust this? Can they manage the device? All those things. And then it'll go off and it'll do the enrollment. One other thing I wanted to show you, well, we can take a look at it while this is doing it. It shows me the profile, the site it is, that's my site, so I'm going to go ahead and enroll, or do an install, I guess the proper term for it. And it wants me to enter my passcode, which on this one is that one. So I'll go ahead and do the install. And this is terribly exciting stuff. I accept again. I trust this device. And it'll go off and do this enrollment now. If we look in my settings, okay, the profile's installed, we'll see those things come in. We'll come back and look at all of those settings in there. Now that that's finished, I open back up in the company portal. The company portal shows me not only this device, but every device that I have enrolled in MDM. So if I want to selectively wipe a device, that is remove it from Intune, so all the data is pulled off it, I can do that. I keep shaking too much. But you see it hasn't finished the device compliance check yet. So we'll continue, and the first thing it'll do is check compliance. Now when we come back to this a little bit later, you'll see that this compliance has finished, and it's allowed me access to mail. The next thing you see here, and these are coming up a little faster than I expected, is this is application management, and we're layering that on top of an installed application. We'll come back and look at that, but that'll make a little more sense. So that's the enrollment process for Intune for iOS devices, very similar for Android devices. Very straightforward, a lot of information for the user. Microsoft produces a really nice two-pager that talks about that you can hang up in your environment and stuff. So really nice way to go on that. So let's talk about a couple of different things here. I'm not a big fan of this presentation mode, but we'll work with it. So kind of an overview, talked about all the M's. We did conditional access denied. We saw that, device enrollment. We'll let that, as I said, we'll let that go ahead and bake. So talk about a little bit about conditional access. Right back to this variable user experience. We talked a little bit about this last night in the Ask the Posers session. We can look at, as Alex said, we can look at various inputs to make a decision about whether or not you're allowed to use that application. At this point, it's very basic. I'm either domain joined or registered, and that happens through Intune for mobile devices is the easiest way to make it happen. And I can also do registration directly to domain joined devices if I set up AAD Connect properly. The latest version of AAD Connect will allow you to do that. It'll add rules to ADFS if they're required to make all this stuff work. So we can look at all of these different claims that are coming in. We can then throw MFA on top of it if we choose to, and we'll see that. And I can deny based on the state of settings. So we'll get to a point where we can start asking health questions about devices. do we have all of the items installed that we expect? Is the device, one of the compliance settings we have, and if we have time we'll take a look at it, is the device jailbroken or rooted. So we don't allow those devices to interact. A lot of these settings can be applied in a pure cloud environment. So we can do things such as inside or outside the network, throw MFA on top of it. These types of things we can do in just pure Azure. You do get a bit more granular control using ADFS because I can separate it per relying party. So I have a different set of rules for my OA relying party than I do for my Exchange Online or Microsoft Identity Provider. So I can have different rules for different relying parties, or I can just let it all ride through Microsoft. And then in ADFS, I can actually take the actions for MFA based on input I get from those calls from Azure AD. Microsoft's extending conditional access from EAS into rich clients and into applications, as Alex said. So we'll be able to say compliance policies apply to this particular SaaS app and be able to make those decisions. Currently, it's configured in the Intune console. Even if you're in an SCCM integrated environment, it's the one item that is not available in SCCM 1602 in the console. You have to step out to the Intune console to look at it. So let's do that. Let's take a quick look at that. Oh, I don't have a mouse, sorry, so let's do. Nope. Intune is still Silverlight, so I have to use my IE browser to connect to it. And I'll do my authentication. And this is just a coincidence that I ended up with a branding on my page that looks similar to Hugh's branding on his demo site. This is just a mountain in my local neighborhood. So we see the same items here. We can go ahead and choose a different method if we want for this multi-factor auth. We can do a text or use verification code from my mobile app. So I can go back to my app and, back to my app. Oh, I'm skipping those things, sorry. I'm accepting a whole bunch of dialogues I wanted you to see on the screen, sorry about that. We saw one of them, so it's kind of interesting, but not as interesting as I'd hoped. So let me get back to the app I'm looking for, my authenticator, and as we saw before, the codes are in there, so I'll select the one I need for the wrong user, 568 608. See if I get it done in time. Yes. All right, so this will load up Intune. Intune allows us to set compliance policies. The compliance policies are then evaluated specifically for conditional access. So we set policies such as we have to have a PIN, maybe we need encryption, can't be jailbroken or rooted, must manage iOS mail from Intune. These things can all be set in compliance policy. The compliance policy then allows us to go out to the conditional access policies and set those values. So I have a single compliance policy. I can have many, but this one is mine. And this just says what's the base really level for anybody to have access to these items. And you see require passcode, length, whether I allow simple passwords or not, additional settings for other items, encryption, email profiles, those kinds of things. But I have, in my conditional access, I've actually blocked the access to the native mail client. So even though I have it checked in that box, it doesn't work in this environment. It's kind of a race condition there. But you see here, this is my Exchange Online conditional access policy. And this allows me to say that I want to manage any of these applications that use modern authentication, which is pretty much all of them now. I select the devices I want this to be applicable to, so iOS, Android, Windows 10 Mobile. And then for Windows devices, back to EMM, I have this domain joined or registered, which makes which allows me to say you can't connect Outlook to mail from your home PC unless it's registered. And so that manages all these things. I also can choose which users this applies to. So I can just say that a certain group of users have the policy, other users do not have the policy, and I can also set an exception policy. So I can make all my users comply with this policy, and I can accept my C-level execs so that when they lose their phone and get a new one and hook up mail, they don't have to go through the enrollment policy. Right? But then I can go back, do reports, and send somebody out to take care of them, get that straightened out. So as I said, can set this up for Exchange Online, SharePoint Online, Skype for Business Online, and Exchange On-Prem. The Exchange On-Prem requires a connector. All we do is we just create a couple policies in Exchange, and you get applied to either the allow or the block policy. It uses the add block quarantine features of Exchange On-Prem. So we looked at the policy, we looked at the actual settings for that, and we saw it in action on the denying access to my Outlook mail. All right, so talk a little bit about Active Directory Federation services. So everything Hugh did up here, he did with the user password syncing into Azure AD. So there's really the two options for how you synchronize users. And I guess I need to build this slide. I didn't realize that. Right, the way Hugh was doing it, syncing a hash of the password, which is then stored up in the cloud, or using federation, which one of is Active Directory Federation. And what this does is it allows us, we sync the user information with Azure. We don't sync the password. Although you can sync the password as well, provides a fallback solution if your ADFS farms go completely away, they melt down in your data centers, and you need to keep people getting access. You can then switch back to managed. Those passwords will already be there synced, and the users can authenticate with Active Directory, Azure Active Directory. I know some people who are doing that, not a ton of people that do both. Usually it's a decision made one or the other. Some people actually don't like working with ADFS at all. A lot of people had some scars from earlier versions. When the authentication occurs, particularly with Azure Active Directory and all of those 2,700 apps up there, of which a couple hundred are actually federated, any of those federated apps are accessed from the app gallery. Microsoft just sends that request out to our IDP, out to ADFS. ADFS then does all the work. If we're going to do multi-factor, it happens there. If we're going to do certificate auth, it happens there. Whatever we're doing in ADFS, and then we return the token. They respect the token, and we get access to the application. So it's very similar. It's just on one side, Microsoft's doing the the authentication, and on the other side, we're doing the authentication on our end. No real authorization in this piece. So ADFS has support for multi-factor authentication, and not just Microsoft's. RSA has a snap-in that goes into it. Duo has a snap-in that goes into an adapter that goes into ADFS. There's a built-in certificate adapter, so if you want to do CAT cards and that kind of second factor, you can do that. As I said, we can use this for apps that are provisioned in the app gallery, so they get directed back to us. So we don't need to set up 700 relying parties. Let Microsoft do that. Everything rides on the single relying party. Put all our eggs in one basket and watch it carefully. This also, ADFS 3.0, the version came out in 2012, R2, also supports device registration, which gets us that ability to bypass or to be accepted by conditional access. And this is provided by the web application proxy, very similar to the Azure application proxy that Hugh demoed, except that's an on-premise component. So it allows for pass-through access as a reverse proxy. It also allows us to do claims-based authentication against it if we want, and do that pre-authentication also as well. So I can show you that if we connect to my OA. My OA is protected by WAP with ADFS. I have a non-claims-aware relying party that can talk to OA 2013 and passes back that authentication for me. So I get all of my ADFS goodness. It knows whether I'm inside or outside, whether to run multi-factor or not. And that's all driven from WAP, which is also part of ADFS 3.0. Then the configuration, these are just some slides for it. Instead of that, let's just do this. Let's go look at it. I really am unhappy that they've made it 4 clicks to get on a VPN in Windows 10.
You characterize WAP as being part of ADFS 3.0, or
Yes.
is it just another role in Windows Server 2012?
Well, it's another role in Windows Server 2012, but the authentication of WAP is dependent on ADFS. And when you install WAP to get the ADFS proxy installed. So they're tied closely together. You don't have to enable WAP. You don't have to publish anything or do anything, but it's the only way to get ADFS proxy installed, is to install WAP. So it's there, it's on the edge, just like ADFS proxy, so it does all those things for us. So I'm going to go ahead and connect to one of my DCs. Take a look at this. So this is my 2012 R2 DC. I also have a 16 DC that's in the mix, but I'm not hitting that. It's not in my load balancing right now. This is the ADFS console. You can see I have authentication policies per relying party. I know it's a little small to see. So I have the device registration service, which just gets automatically installed for me. It works with self-signed certificates, so it doesn't have to be tied to a PKI or anything like that. It just works because it trusts the certificate when it gets presented back, so it's all good. I have an Outlook web app and Exchange control panel. I set these up in slightly different ways, and then I have my standard O365 setup. So if I look at the Outlook web app, and I think I need to get back down again here, and I want to look at my custom multi-factor authentication. I've set up my Outlook web app so that it uses multi-factor authentication, but only when I connect to the internet. And I talked about this yesterday a little bit. This is good for very, very simple scenarios. So if I want to say internal, external, or I want to say registered or unregistered, or I want to do a group, but anytime you try and mix more of them, you have to get down into the claim rules to really make it work. The UI is just not very dependable. When I set up the multi-factor authentication, I have a global multi-factor policy as well, which has to be applied. So you see the certificate auth in there as a multi-factor. I add the adapter for MFA, and I'm able to enable it. And I can also set some rules here globally, but it's much easier to set them on the relying party. So you see that that particular setting is configured with, I showed you the 001. If I'm inside, I don't get prompted for MFA. If I'm outside, I do. Just for fun, I'll show you my current claims in Office 365. I just have a few now. So I'm up to 8 claim rules in Office 365 because of the Windows 10 automatic device registration, which uses ADFS and does a machine auth against it and everything. I had a lot of fun playing around getting those rules straightened out. But you see, what I can show you is that because I'm inside the network now, you saw me before connecting to my ADFS for various things. If I do my, I can't even see my screen, so we're going to hope for the best here. And you see I get the internal pop-up here for Windows authentication instead of the forms-based auth that I get on the outside. I can configure that. I've actually done that for customers where we've forced forms-based inside because they think this Windows pop-up logon is ugly and they hated it. So we changed it and we forced forms-based for everybody. So it can be done. So this is my account that actually has something on here. It's my internal email. And you notice I didn't get prompted for MFA. And that was because only on the outside am I prompted. Inside, I'm not prompted for multi-factor with that. So that's how that all works. I'm going to have to kill my VPN because I didn't go back and set it as a split tunnel, and I want to be able to connect to the internet. So, oh, great. Well, maybe I won't. We'll figure out what we do with that. Okay, so that's multi-factor, really easy to configure, but also if you want to dig down into the claim rules and get really detailed about it, you can. You can do a lot more configuration. You can make very specific your own conditional access rules if the ones that Microsoft provide don't meet. Multi-factor authentication, we saw it installed there. There is an on-premises component to multi-factor authentication, rides along in the whole EMS suite. You get the licenses for free. The multi-factor authentication server can support auth for IIS services, for anything that does radius or LDAP authentication. The service connects to the multi-factor authentication server, which is an actual server that sits on-prem. You want to have at least two. They do kind of NT4 single master replication, so you have to manage that a little bit. But it makes the connection to the MFA server, and the MFA server goes out to the directory, does the authentication. If that passes, then we do the second factor, as you've seen a couple times. If that fails, then of course we come right back. There's also SDKs we can use and plug things directly in. We've talked a bit about that before. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on it. There are some differences between the versions on-prem and in the cloud. You get some additional reporting functionalities. You get the ability to submit fraud alerts, which will lock the MFA for that user, if that's what you choose to do. Have this ability for custom phone messages. So if you want to do your own messages that say this is your company validating a call, all those things are available in there. We have, this slide is not right. Let's see if we can get it to build out. Nope. The slide did not quite come through the properties, so we're missing one. If you saw the app notifications, that's a good one to be missing. That's the one I actually used when I had the phone up on the screen. So we have a phone call, which is just a voice prompt that says this is a call. The default is press pound to accept. Press 0 pound to submit a fraud alert. You can change all of those if you want. A lot of people do 911 for fraud alert. Just make sure it doesn't get hit accidentally. We have two-way and one-way text. So this SMS text, it says reply with the code, and that's all you do, put in the SMS and reply. The one-way text, the application asks for that code, and you input the code. It only works with some cases. ADFS works really well with a couple of other cases. This is really nice if you have people who are overseas and don't want to pay the charges for replying to an SMS in the US. You saw the app notification and our oath tokens, which allow us to use the Authenticator app and just input a key without getting a prompt. Very nice for on a plane or somewhere else you don't have cell service, like North Bend. I think in the interest of time, we'll skip this one. If we have time, we'll come back and do the multi-factor, because you've seen a little bit of that. If you're interested in seeing the console inside and stuff, we can certainly do that. But let's go back to mobile device management, and we'll spend the rest of our 19 minutes on that. So mobile device management is really about, it used to be, years ago, I worked for a company called Enterprise Mobile, which was funded by Microsoft to try and get things in, do management of enterprise devices. And back then, the devices we managed were mostly very expensive custom devices, symbol devices, Motorola devices that were shared, and we did things with McDonald's and things like that. Lockdown devices, turned off the camera, turn off infrared. Who remembers infrared? All those kinds of things. We still can do those things, but it's really not what we do a lot in mobile device management anymore. The basic things we do, we talked about the compliance policy. You saw my compliance policy. We also can do configuration policies, so I can push out Wi-Fi profiles so users can connect automatically to Wi-Fi. I can push out VPN profiles, use those. Both Windows 10 and iOS have per-app VPNs, so I can associate that VPN that I create on your device with an application. You open the application, VPN gets instantiated, you use the application, close it out, the VPN gets dropped. User doesn't need to know anything about it. It's dependent on certificate authentication for the VPN, but it supports third-party VPNs. It's not an inbuilt thing like a number of MDM providers have. Android can still do VPNs, but they don't have a per-app. They don't have that construct, so they really can't do that. Of course, we can do application distribution. That is, we create this company portal. You'll see it in a minute, where we're able to install applications from. We can also do required installs, which prompt the user to install the application and let us know if the user has not for some reason. So if we want to install an RMS sharing app or something. We can do certificate distribution. So root certificates, so you trust all of your certs. When I go to internal websites and it's secured with an internal cert, I trust it because I've got the root CA on my device. I can also do user certs using Network Device Enrollment Service, which is SCEP, the Simple Certificate Enrollment Protocol, which is what everybody uses to enroll user certs on devices. So I can provision those certificates for the VPN, for the per-app VPN. So I'm able to do all of this from end to end. The user doesn't need to know anything about it. I can also do custom configurations. So if there's something that the product, iOS or Android, supports that for some reason isn't in the UI, I have custom profiles. I can go plug in either OMA URI for Android or custom XML for the iOS if I build it out of the configurator on Mac or something like that. We have selective wipe. This was a term of art created by Mobile Iron, kind of serendipitously, I think. What used to happen on an iOS device is if you sent an EAS command called a reset, the first thing iOS did was wipe out the mailbox, and then it would go back to Exchange and pull down a new copy of it. Well, if they blocked access to email and sent the reset command, it did a wipe of email. And so was born selective wipe. Well, it's gone a lot farther. Now, everything we put on the device, we pull off. Certificates, root certs, VPN configuration, Wi-Fi configuration, apps, if they're LOB apps, if they're in-house apps. If it's an app from the App Store, we really don't know whether the user installed it or reinstalled it, so we don't pull it off. But if it's a line of business application, we pull it, we take the data. If we do selective wipe and we've configured mail, we pull the mail configuration off, wipe that out. If they're application management apps, then we pull those out. We pull the management out, and we pull all the data out as well. We can do asset tracking, of course, and of course there's reporting. It's not the last line on my list, but just about. And this app configuration is a new piece from iOS that nobody's really using yet, but think of it as INI files for apps. It's configuration information for apps. You can send it down along with the iOS app, and it'll perform the configuration for that application.
Do you do that app config for apps that were pushed through MDM?
Can you do an app config for something that isn't pushed through MDM? I don't know. I don't know how. I haven't actually seen that in action. One of the things that some customers think we're missing, and I think actually we're missing, is the ability to configure the Outlook client for email. Now, Microsoft will tell you, well, it's only one piece of information they have to add. There's only one delta. They have to enter their email address, because even if we configure it, they still have to enter their password, and those are the only two pieces you need. And it's like, yeah, that's fine, but isn't it a nice experience when you open up your phone and mail's configured for you? I think it is. So I'd like to see them do that. I don't know about the app configuration. It's a good question. I have not run into it. I've only recently run into anybody using the device enrollment program for Apple, which is very cool, which kind of ties your device back to your MDM. Even if somebody wipes the device, when they bring it back up again, it rolls right back in the MDM, so you can go find it again. It's really kind of nice. So let's take a look at MDM. And what we did open up MDM. Let's see if I can. I'm going to need to refresh it, and if my VPN doesn't go away, I'm going to have problems with this. Oh, no. Yeah, I'm just going to disconnect and reconnect. Hello? That can't be still connected. It's an IKE v2 connection? Oh, well. Let's see if we can get to it. Yeah, maybe I did set it to be split tunneling. So as I said, basic kind of table stakes is configuration policies. So we've got tons of policies in here, not enough time to go through a bunch of them, but you can see I've got and a naming convention. I've been doing this long enough, I actually have a naming convention, so I can sort these things. You can see I've got root policies, I've got Wi-Fi policies, an iOS root certificate, SCEP enrollment that goes through NDAS. So all these different policies in here. You can dig through and take a look at all the settings. It's kind of interesting, but again, a little bit limited on time. As far as app distribution, deploying apps from the app stores, be it the iOS App Store or Google Play, you just input the URL from that site into a form, add some additional information, and you get this configuration for these apps. You'll notice that a lot of these show as managed iOS app from the App Store. These are the MAM apps, the application managed. So I create a policy that restricts what I can do with the application once it's installed on my device. So I can control what users can save, whether they can copy and paste between applications, and then when I distribute that application, I select who it goes to. In this case, I'm sending it out to a group called executives. I also determine what the deployment action is. I can choose a required install or an available install. And I can't do that for all types, but mostly I can, and particularly for the application managed apps, I can do a required install. And then I apply that management policy. There's a few more settings in an iOS version, but it looks very similar to this Android one. So what kind of things are set in that policy? Well, if I go back to my configuration policies, I can find my mobile application management policy for iOS 7. Here, the first thing up here says restrict web content to a managed browser. So both Android and iOS have a managed browser. Anything I click on in a link from a managed app, whether that be email or a Word document or PowerPoint, will take me through that managed browser. If you imagine, you can layer a VPN on top of that managed browser and take all that traffic back through your organization if you choose. So we get a lot of control, not so much about the device, but how the user's using the device, what they're doing with our data on the device. That's what we care about now, not so much about whether the phone's turned on or locations available. Then the rest of these settings really apply to this data relocation. So prevent backups to iTunes and iCloud, allow the app to transfer data. Now this is automatic transfer, kind of OLE, if you think, kind of the background transfer of data. And what it's currently set to policy managed apps, which says any application that shares the same management policy as this application, we can share data between because we trust it. I like to think of it as the circle of trust. Then allow app to receive data from other apps. The default is allow data to come in from anywhere. So I don't care where you got the data. If you got it off a Google search and you want to paste it in a Word document, I'm good with that. You're going the other way, I have a problem. So I allow it to get data from any app but not share to any app. I can prevent save as. Any app that is not in this circle of trust can't save the document. So I prevent Box, Dropbox, Facebook. I can't save documents to any of those places. It has to be well, now Box has, their enterprise version supports MAM. So Box EMM can be in the circle of trust. And the last one here, restrict copy and paste with other apps. This is for manual copy and paste between applications, and I restrict it again in the same way to only apps within the same management policy that I trust. And then you'll see this starts to get a little overblown. Requiring a PIN for access. I didn't really understand this one when they first came up with it. I put a PIN on the device. Why do I want a PIN on the application? Well, then, as Microsoft's want, a few weeks later they came out with the next iteration, which is MAM without Intune, which means you can run these without putting a device management policy on the device, which means you don't know if you have a PIN on the device. Well, now we can put a PIN on the app. This is really, I know you're going, why would I want to do that?
Well, even if you had a PIN on the device, you still might want a PIN on the app so you could unlock the device and give it to somebody and they can't.
Yeah, that was my reasoning first as well, was I thought, oh, well, yeah, this is so I can hand somebody my unlocked device and they can't get in and open my recent folders. So there's another reasonable point for that. You can get a Windows phone and put them in the kids' playroom thing and restrict them. But that's a good point. That's another reason to put the PIN on. We can go even farther, though. We can require corporate credentials for access. So if you really want to see the pitchforks and torches, then go ahead and make people log in every time they open Word. Block managed apps from running on jailbroken and rooted devices, because once that happens, all bets are off. We have no idea what's going on then, so we just say we don't do it. We recheck for access. Notice the PIN reset. If I screw up the PIN on my device, it allows me to reset it on the device. I just have to authenticate. Then I have to do my full corp credentials. Then I can reset the PIN. So I don't have to get help desk involved because I forgot my PIN in this case. Okay? So those are the policies. So let's, you reminded me I got 5 minutes to go. So let's take a look. We'll do my Julia Child impersonation and pull out the baked managed system and see if I still have my air server up and running. Looks like it. All right. So this is my iPad. This one's been enrolled. If we looked in the console, we'd see it in there. You can see, we can go back to the other one and take a look at the mail as well. But here, this is a managed app. This Outlook in here is a managed app. As it comes up, it's going to tell me that it's being managed. And I'm going to put some glasses on so I can see what I'm doing. And then what I want to do is I want to go grab a document. And notice it tells me as I'm going into this, your IT department protects company data in this app. And I can click Learn More and it'll tell me more about it. I can tell it, don't tell me this anymore. Or I can just say OK, and it'll tell me every time I start the thing up, which I like to have when I'm demoing, obviously. So there I have a PIN. I need to put the PIN in to get access to the application. Now that I'm in there, I actually select Word because I want to open the document in Word. I could have just selected the document, I'll bring it up in a preview, and then I can choose Word after that. So it's opening the document in Word, and it's going to also tell me here that I'm managed, and as I said, I just leave those on all the time. And next week, I'm going to go buy a new iPad because this one's so slow. All right, so here comes the document. I swear it's coming. 3 minutes. Tick tock, tick tock. Okay. And I don't know if these cherries are any good. Most of the recipes I play with in this stuff, I do actually make sure that they're reasonable. So I'm going to copy this, just put it in the copy buffer, and then I'm going to go off to an application that's not managed, like say Notes. And I'll create a note. I'll create a note. Maybe I won't. And it won't let me paste into it. That's the point. What happens is when you're using application management, when something is pasted into the buffer or copied into the buffer, it's encrypted. And the only ones that know how to decrypt that are in the same management application profile. So when I choose to paste into this stupid notes that won't open for me, there's paste, but there's nothing in the buffer. Nothing it can read anyway. And so it shows me paste, but it won't allow me to use it. I can go back to Excel, though, because Excel is a trusted app, and I can paste it in there. Now, one of the nice things about this application management, a lot of the MDMs that use containers, you have to use a specific app. And you can only use that app for work. You can't use it for personal. Well, we, being Microsoft, recognize that you use it both work and personal. And if it's not a document that comes from a protected source, then you're able to do anything you want to with it. Why this is interesting is because when I was testing this, it took me a little while to figure out that I was unable to paste into a blank Excel spreadsheet because I hadn't stored it anywhere. And the system had no idea whether this was a personal or a corporate document. So I had to have this saved document that's actually a corporate document, and you see now I can take that content and I can paste it in there because it is in the circle of trust, right? So that's application management. One other piece of it, let me show you this real quickly, and I'm running over, but everybody runs over, don't they? Isn't that the rule when you're presenting? You're supposed to run over by just a little bit. All right, so if I try to duplicate, which is the term of art for saving a copy of the document, if I choose my personal OneDrive, it won't let me. It'll tell me my IT department doesn't allow me to do that. I duplicate it. It tries to connect to my personal OneDrive, and it'll tell me that it can't connect. Oh, no, I must have chosen the wrong one. Well, I'm out of time. The one last thing I did want to show you was the MAM in the Azure portal, but it's in the brand new Azure portal, allows you to do these MAM configurations for devices that are not enrolled in Intune. So if you've got a 2-year commit with another provider and you want to layer MAM on top of it, you can do that with Intune. And then when you're ready to roll everything over to Intune, you can do that. Or in cases where you have maybe vendors or doctors or someone else who doesn't want to be managed, but you want to protect your content, you can force them to use MAM without having to have Intune installed on the device. So, hope that's helpful. If you got questions, I'll be here until tomorrow night.